5 Children and It by E. Nesbit. Chapter 3. Being Wanted. The morning after the children had been the possessors of boundless wealth and had been unable to buy anything really useful or enjoyable with it, except 2 pairs of cotton gloves, 12 penny buns, an imitation crocodile skin purse, and a ride in a pony cart, they awoke without any of the enthusiastic happiness which they'd felt on the previous day, when they remembered how they had had the luck to find a Samiad, or sand fairy, and to receive its promise to grant them a new wish every day. For now they had had 2 wishes, beauty and wealth, and neither had exactly made them happy. But the happening of strange things, even if they are not completely pleasant things, is more amusing than those times when nothing happens but meals, and they are not always completely pleasant, especially on the days when it's cold mutton or hash. There was no chance of talking things over before breakfast, because everyone overslept itself as it happened, and it needed a vigorous and determined struggle to get up and dressed, so as to be only 10 minutes late. During the meal some efforts were made to deal with the question of the Samiad in an impartial spirit, but it is very difficult to discuss anything thoroughly and at the same time to attend faithfully to your baby brother's breakfast needs. The lamb was particularly lively that morning. He not only wriggled his body through the bar of his high chair and hung by his head, but collared a tablespoon with desperate suddenness and hit Cyril heavily on the head with it, and then cried because it was taken away from him. He put his fat fist in his bread and milk and demanded nam, which was only allowed for tea. He sang, he put his feet on the table, he clamoured to go walkie, and the conversation ended up something like this. "Look here, about that sand fairy. Look out, you'll have the milk over." Milk removed to a safe distance. "Yes, about that fairy. No, lamb dear, give Panther the narky poon. Look, nothing we've had yet has turned out. Oh, look, he nearly had the mustard that time. I wonder whether we'd better wish... Hello! Oh, you've done it now, my boy." And in a flash of glass and pink baby paws, the bowl of golden carp in the middle of the table rolled on its side and poured a flood of mixed water and goldfish into the baby's lap, and into the laps of the others. Everyone was almost as much upset as the goldfish. The lamb was the only one remaining calm. When the pool on the floor had been mopped up, and the leaping, gasping goldfish collected and put back in the water, the baby was taken away to be entirely redressed by Martha, and most of the others had to change completely. The pinafores and jackets that had been bathed in goldfish and water were hung out to dry, and then it turned out that Jane must either mend the dress she'd torn the day before, or appear all day in her best petticoat. It was white and soft and frilly and trimmed with lace, and very, very pretty, quite as pretty as a frock, if not more so. Only it was not a frock, and Martha's word was law. She wouldn't let Jane wear her best frock, and refused to listen for a moment to Robert's suggestion that Jane should wear her best petticoat and call it a dress. "It's not respectable." And when people say that, it is no use anyone saying anything. You'll find that out for yourselves some day. So there was nothing for it but for Jane to mend her frock. The hole had been torn the day before when she happened to tumble down in the High Street of Rochester, just where a water cart had passed on its silvery way. She had grazed her knee, and her stocking was much more than grazed, and her dress was cut by the same stone which had attended to the knee and the stocking. And of course the others were not such sneaks as to abandon a comrade in misfortune, so they all sat down on the grass plot around the sundial, and Jane darned away for dear life. The lamb was still in the hands of Martha, having its clothes changed, so conversation was possible. Anthea and Robert timidly tried to conceal their inmost thought, which was that the Samiad was not to be trusted. But Cyril said, "Oh, speak out whatever you've got to say. I hate all this hinting and don't know and sneakish ways like that." So Robert, on a bound, said, "Sneak yourself. Anthea and me weren't so goldfish as you 2 were, so we got changed quicker. And if you ask me, I didn't ask you," said Jane, biting off a needleful of thread, as she'd always been strictly forbidden to do. "I don't care if you do or not," said Robert. "But Anthea and I think the Samiad is a spiteful brute. It gave us our wishes, and I suppose it gave itself its own at the same time, because I feel almost sure its wishes every time that our wishes won't be any good. Let's let the tiresome beast alone, and just go and have a jolly good game of forts or something on our own in the chalk pit." You will remember the happily situated house where these children were spending their holidays lay between a chalk quarry and a gravel pit. Cyril and Jane were more hopeful, They generally were. I don't think the Psammead does it on purpose. And after all, it was silly to wish for boundless wealth. £50 in 2-shilling pieces would have been much more sensible, and wishing to be beautiful as the day was donkeyish. I don't want to be disagreeable, but it was. We must try to find a really useful wish, and wish it. I think so too. Jane dropped her work. It's too silly to have a chance like this and not use it. I never heard of anyone else outside a book who had such a chance. There must be simply heaps of things we could wish for that wouldn't turn out bad, like these 2 things have. Do let's think hard and wish something nice, so that we can have a really jolly day, what there is left of it. Jane darned away again like mad, for time was indeed getting on, and everyone began to talk at once. If you'd been there, you could not possibly have made head or tail of a talk, but these children were used to talking by fours, as soldiers march, and each of them would say what they wanted to quite comfortably, and listen to the agreeable sound of its own voice, and at the same time have 3/4 of 2 sharp ears to spare for listening to what the others said. There's an easy example in multiplication of vulgar fractions, but as I dare say you can't do even that, I won't ask you to tell me whether 3/4 times 2 equals 1.5. But I will ask you to believe me that this was the amount of ear each child was able to lend to the others. Lending ears was common in Roman times, as we learn from Shakespeare, but I fear I'm getting too instructive. When the frock was darned, the start for the gravel pit was delayed by Martha's insisting on everybody's washing its hands, which was nonsense, because nobody had been doing anything at all except Jane, and how can you get dirty doing nothing? That is a difficult question, and I cannot answer it on paper, but in real life I would show you. Or you me, which is more likely. During the conversation, in which the 6 ears were lent, there were 4 children, so that sum comes right. It has been decided that £50 in 2-shilling pieces was the right wish to have, and the lucky children, who could have anything in the wide world by just wishing for it, hurriedly went to the gravel pit to express their wishes to the Psammead. Martha caught them at the gate, and insisted on them taking the baby with them. Not want him, indeed? Everybody'd want him. He's a little duck. They'd want him with all their hearts, they would. And you know you promised your ma to take him out every blessed day. I know we did, but I wish the lamb wasn't quite so young and small. It'd be much better fun taking him out then. He'll mend off his youngness with time. And as for his smallness, I don't think you'd fancy carrying him any more if he was bigger. Besides, he can talk a bit. Bless his precious fat legs. He's a little ducky. He feels the benefit of a new-laid egg, so he does. Oh, he's a pet. With this and a kiss, she plumped the lamb into Anthea's arms, and went back to make new pinafores on the sewing machine. She was a rapid performer on this instrument. The lamb laughed with pleasure, and said, "Walkie with Panty," and rode on Robert's back with yells of joy, and tried to feed Jane with stones, altogether made himself so agreeable that nobody could long be sorry that he was of the party. The enthusiastic Jane even suggested that they should devote a week's wishes to ensuring the baby's future, by adding such gifts for him as good fairies give to infant princes in the proper fairy tales. But Anthea soberly reminded her that as the sand fairies' wishes only lasted till sunset, they could not ensure any benefit to the baby's later years. And Jane owned that it would be better to wish for £50 in 2-shilling pieces and buy the lamb a £3.15 rocking horse, like those in the Army and Navy stores. It was settled that, as soon as they had wished for the money and got it, they would get Mr. Crispin to drive them into Rochester again, taking Martha with them if they could not get out of taking her, and they would make a list of the things they really wanted before they started. Full of high hopes and excellent resolutions, they went round the safe slow cart road to the gravel pits, and as they went in between the mounds of gravel, a sudden thought came to them, and would have turned their ruddy cheeks pale if they had been children in a book. Being real live children, it only made them stop and look at each other with rather blank and silly expressions, for now they remembered that yesterday, when they had asked for Psammead for boundless wealth, and it was getting ready to fill the quarry with the minted gold of bright guineas, millions of them, it had told the children to run along outside the quarry for fear that they should be buried alive in the heavy splendid treasure, and they had run, and so it happened that they had not had time to mark the spot where the Psammead was, with a ring of stones, as before, and it was this thought that put such silly expressions on their faces. "Never mind," said the hopeful Jane, "we'll soon find him." But this, though easily said, was hard in the doing. They looked, and though they found their seaside spades, nowhere could they find the sand fairy. At last they had to sit down and rest, not at all because they were weary or disheartened, of course, but because the lamb insisted on being put down, and you cannot look very carefully after anything you may have happened to lose in the sand if you have an active baby to look after at the same time. Get someone to drop your best knife in the sand next time you go to the seaside, and then take your baby brother with you and go and look for it, and you'll see I'm right. The lamb, as Martha had said, was feeling the benefit of the country air, and he was as frisky as a sandhopper. The elder ones longed to go on talking about the new wishes they would have when or if they found the Psammead again, but the lamb wished to enjoy himself. He watched his opportunity and threw a handful of sand in Anthea's face, and then suddenly burrowed his own head in the sand and waved his fat legs in the air. Then, of course, the sand got in his eyes, as it had into Anthea's, and he howled. The thoughtful Robert had brought one solid bottle of ginger beer with him, relying on a thirst that had never yet failed him. This had to be uncorked hurriedly. It was the only wet thing within reach. It was necessary to wash the sand out of the lamb's eyes somehow. Of course, the ginger hurt horribly, and he howled even more. And amid his anguish of kicking, the bottle was upset, and the beautiful ginger beer frothed out onto the sand and was lost for ever. It was then that Robert, usually a very patient brother, so far forgot himself as to say, "Anyone would want him indeed, only they don't. Martha doesn't not really, or she'd jolly well keep him with her. He's a little nuisance, that's what he is. It's too bad. I only wish everybody did want him with all their hearts, and then we might get a bit of peace in our lives." The lamb stopped howling now, because Jane had suddenly remembered that there is only one safe way of taking things out of little children's eyes, and that is with your own soft, wet tongue. It is quite easy if you love the baby as much as you ought to. Then there was a little silence. Robert was not proud of himself for having been so cross, and the others were not proud of him either. You often notice that sort of silence when someone has said something it ought not to, and everyone else holds its tongue and waits for the one who oughtn't to have said it to say that it is sorry. The silence was broken by a sigh. A breath suddenly let out. The children's heads turned as if there had been a string tied to each nose, and someone had pulled all the strings at once. And everyone saw the sand fairy sitting quite close to them, with the expression which it used as a smile on its hairy face. "Good morning. I did that quite easily. Everyone wants him now." "Doesn't matter," said Robert sulkily, because he knew he'd been behaving like a pig. "No matter who wants him, because there's no one here to anyhow." "Ingratitude. It's a dreadful vice." "We're not ungrateful," Jane made haste to say. "But we didn't really want that wish. Robert only just said it. Could you take it back and give us a new one?"
"No, I can't. Chopping and changing. It's not business. You ought to be careful what you do wish for. There was a little boy once. He'd wished for a Plesiosaurus instead of an Ichthyosaurus, because he was too lazy to remember the easy names of everyday things. His father was very vexed with him, made him go to bed before tea-time, and would not let him out in the nice flint boat along with the other children. It was the annual school treat, too, next day. He came and flung himself down near me on the morning of the treat, and he kicked his little prehistoric legs about, and he said he wished he was dead. Oh, and then, of course, he was."
"How awful!" said all the children together.
"Well, only till sunset, of course. Still, it was quite enough for his father and mother. And he caught it when he woke up, I can tell you. He didn't turn to stone, I forget why. But there must have been some reason. They didn't know being dead is only asleep. You're bound to wake up somewhere or other, either where you go to sleep or in some better place. You may be sure he caught it, though, giving them such a turn. Why, he wasn't allowed to taste megatherium for a month after that. Nothing but oysters and periwinkles and common things like that."
At that moment the lamb noticed the small brown furry thing in front of him, and cried out, "Puff, puff, puffy!" and made a grab. "It's not a pussy," Anthea was beginning, when the sand fairy leapt back.
"Oh, my left whisker! Don't let him touch me! He's wet!"
Its fur stood on end with horror, and indeed a good deal of the ginger beer had been spilt on the blue smock of the lamb. The Psammead dug with its hands and feet, and vanished in an instant and a whirl of sand. The children marked the spot with a ring of stones. "We may as well get along home," said Robert. "I'll say I'm sorry, But anyway, if it's no good, it's no harm. And we know where the sandy thing is for tomorrow." The others were noble. No one reproached Robert at all. Cyril picked up the lamb, who was now quite himself again, and off they went by the safe cart road. The cart road from the gravel pits joins the road almost directly. At the gate into the road the party stopped to shift the lamb from Cyril's back to Robert's, and as they paused a very smart open carriage came in sight, with a coachman and a groom on the box, and inside the carriage a lady, very grand indeed, with a dress all white lace and red ribbons, and a parasol all red and white, and a white fluffy dog on her lap with a red ribbon round its neck. She looked at the children, and particularly at the baby, and she smiled at them. The children were used to this, for the lamb was, as all the servants said, a very taking child. So they waved their hands politely to the lady, and expected her to drive on. But she did not. Instead, she made the coachman stop, and she beckoned to Cyril, and when he went up to the carriage, she said, "What a dear darling duck of a baby! Oh, I should so like to adopt it. Do you think its mother would mind?" "She'd mind very much indeed," said Anthea shortly. "Oh, but I should bring it up in luxury, you know. I'm Lady Chittenden. You must have seen my photograph in the illustrated papers. They call me a beauty, you know. Of course, that's all nonsense. Anyway," she opened the carriage door and jumped out. She had the wonderfulest red high-heeled shoes with silver buckles. "Let me hold him a minute." She took the lamb and held him very awkwardly, as if she were not used to babies. Then suddenly she jumped into the carriage, and with the lamb in her arms slammed the door shut. "Drive on!" The lamb roared, the little white dog barked, and the coachman hesitated. "Drive on, I tell you!" The coachman did, for, as he said afterwards, it was as much as his place was worth not to. The four children looked at each other, and then with one accord they rushed after the carriage, and held on behind. Down the dusty road went the smart carriage, and after it, at double-quick time, ran the twinkling legs of the lamb's brothers and sisters. The lamb howled louder and louder, but presently his howls changed by slow degree to hiccupy gurgles, and then all was still, and they knew he'd gone to sleep. The carriage went on, and the 8 feet that twinkled through the dust were growing quite stiff and tired before the carriage stopped at the lodge of a grand park. The children crouched down behind the carriage, and the lady got out. She looked at the baby as it lay on the carriage seat, and hesitated. "Oh, the darling! I won't disturb it." She went into the lodge to talk to the woman there about a setting of Buff Orpington eggs that had not turned out well. The coachman and footman sprang from a box and bent over the sleeping lamb. "Oh, he's a fine boy. I wish he was mine," said the coachman. "Well, he wouldn't favour you much," said the groom. "He's too handsome." The coachman pretended not to hear. "I wonder at her now, though, I do really. I mean, she hates kids. She's got none of her own. She can't abide other folks's." The children, crouching in the white dust under the carriage, exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Tell you what, blowed if I don't hide the little nipper in the hedge and tell her his brothers took him. Then I can come back for him afterwards." "Oh, no, you don't. I've took to that kid so as never was. And if anyone's going to have him, it's going to be me. So there." "You stow your gab. You don't want no kids. And if you did, one kid's the same as another to you. I'm a married man and a judge of breed. I knows a first-rate yearling when I sees him. I'm a-going to have him. And least said, soon it's mended." "I'd have thought," said the other sneeringly, "you'd had enough. What with Alfred and Albert and Louise and Victor Stanley and Eleanor Beatrice and another." The coachman hit the footman in the chin. The footman hit the coachman in the waistcoat. The next minute the two were fighting here and there, in and out, up and down, and all over everywhere, and the little dog jumped onto the box of the carriage and began barking like mad. Cyril, still crouching in the dust, waddled on bent legs to the side of the carriage farthest from the battlefield, and unfastened the door. The two men were far too occupied about their quarrel to notice anything. He took the lamb in his arms, and, still stooping, carried the sleeping baby a dozen yards along the road to where a stile led into a wood. The others followed, and there among the hazels and young oaks and sweet chestnuts, covered by high, strong-scented bracken, they all lay hidden, until the angry voices of the men were hushed at the angry voice of a red and white lady, and, after a long and anxious search, the carriage at last drove away.
My only hat! Everyone does want him now, and no mistake. That Sammy-ad's done us again. That tricky little brute. For any sake, let's get the kid safe home.
They peeped out, and finding on the right hand only lonely white road, and nothing but lonely white road on the left, they took courage, and the road, Anthea carrying the sleeping lamb. Adventures dogged their footsteps. A boy with a bundle of faggots on his back dropped his bundle by the roadside and asked to look at the baby, then offered to carry him, but Anthea was not to be caught that way twice. They all walked on, but the boy followed, and Cyril and Robert couldn't make him go away until they had more than once invited him to smell their fists. Afterwards, a little girl in a blue and white checked pinafore actually followed them for a quarter of a mile, crying for the precious baby. And then she was only got rid of by threats of tying her to a tree in the wood with all their pocket handkerchiefs.
"So that the bears can eat you as soon as it gets dark," said Cyril severely.
She went off crying. It presently seemed wise to the brothers and sisters of the baby, who was wanted by everyone, to hide in the hedge whenever they saw someone coming, and thus they managed to prevent the lamb from arousing the inconvenient affection of a milkman, a stone-breaker, and a man who drove a cart with a paraffin barrel at the back of it. They were nearly home when the worst thing of all happened. Turning a corner suddenly, they came upon 2 vans, a tent, and a company of gypsies encamped by the side of the road. The vans were hung all round with wicker chairs and cradles, and flower stands and feather brushes. A lot of ragged children were industriously making dust pies in the road, and 2 men lay on the grass smoking, and 3 women were doing the family washing in an old red watering can with the top broken off. In a moment all the gypsies, men, women, and children, surrounded Anthea and the baby.
"Oh, let me hold him, little lady,"
said one of the gypsy women, who had a mahogany-coloured face and dust-coloured hair.
"I want a hair of his head. What a little picture! I'd rather not." "Let me have him," said another woman, whose face was also the hue of mahogany, and her hair jet black in greasy curls. "I've 19 of my own, so I have."
"No," said Anthea bravely, but her heart beat so that it nearly choked her. Then one of the men pushed forward.
"Swelp me if it ain't my own long-lost child. Have he got a strawberry birthmark on his left ear? No? Well, then he's my own babby, stolen from me in innocent infancy. Hand him over. I will not have the law on you this time."
He snatched the baby from Anthea, who turned scarlet and burst into tears of pure rage. The others were standing quite still. This was much the most terrible thing that had ever happened to them. Even being taken by the police in Rochester was nothing to this. Cyril was quite white, and his hands trembled a little, but he made a sign to the others to shut up, and he was silent for a minute too, thinking hard. Then he said,
"Well, we don't want to keep him if he's yours. But, you see, he's used to us. But you shall have him if you want him."
"No," cried Anthea. "No!" Cyril glared at her.
"Well, of course we wants him,"
said one of the women, trying to get the baby out of the man's arms. The lamb howled loudly.
"He's hurt!"
shrieked Anthea.
"Stow it,"
said Cyril.
"You trust me."
"Look here, he's awfully tiresome with people he doesn't know very well. Supposing we just stay here a bit until he gets used to you, and then, when it's bedtime, I give you my word of honour we'll go away, and we'll let you keep him if you want to. And then, when we're gone, you can decide which of you is to have him, as you all want him so much."
"Well, I suppose that's fair enough,"
said the man, trying to loosen the red neckerchief which the lamb had caught hold of and drawn round his mahogany throat so tight that he could hardly breathe. The gypsies whispered together. Cyril took the chance to whisper too.
"Sunset! We'll get away then."
And then his brothers and sisters were filled with wonder and admiration at his having been so clever as to remember this.
"Oh, do let him come to us," said Jane. "We'll sit down here. We'll take care of him for you till he gets used to you."
"What about dinner?" said Robert suddenly. The others looked at him with scorn.
"Fancy bothering about your beastly dinner when your
I mean, when's the baby?" Robert carefully winked at her and went on. "You won't mind my just running home to get our dinner? I can bring it out here in a basket." His brother and sisters felt themselves very noble and despised him. They did not know his secret intention, but the gypsies did in a minute.
"Oh, yes, and fetch the police with a pack of lies about it being your baby instead of ours? Yeah. D'ye ever catch a weasel asleep?"
"If you're hungry, you can pick along a bit with us," said the light-haired gypsy woman, not unkindly. "You leave that blessed kid Lowell all his buttons off, give him to the little lady, and let's see if they can't get him used to us a bit." So the lamb was handed back, but the gypsies crowded so closely that he could not possibly stop howling. Then the man with the red handkerchief said, "Here, Vera, make up that fire. You girls, you see to the pot. Now, give the kid a chance." So the gypsies, very much against their will, went off to their work, and the children and the lamb were left sitting on the grass. "He'll be all right at sunset," Jane whispered. "But it's so awful. Suppose they're frightfully angry when they come to their senses. They might beat us, or leave us tied to trees, or something." "No, they won't," Anthea said. "Oh, my lamb, don't cry any more. It's all right. Panty's got you. Panty's got you, ducky. They aren't unkind people, or they wouldn't be going to give us any dinner." "Dinner," said Robert. "I wouldn't touch their nasty dinner. It would choke me." The others thought so too then. But when the dinner was ready, it turned out to be supper, and happened between 4 and 5, so they were glad enough to take what they could get. It was boiled rabbit with onions, and some bird rather like a chicken, but stringier about its legs, and with a stronger taste. The lamb had bread soaked in hot water and brown sugar sprinkled on the top. He liked this very much, and consented to let the 2 gypsy women feed it to him, as he sat on Anthea's lap. All that long hot afternoon, Robert and Cyril and Anthea and Jane had to keep the lamb amused and happy, while the gypsies looked eagerly on. By the time the shadows grew long and black across the meadows, he had really taken to the woman with the light hair, and even consented to kiss his hand to the children, and to stand up and bow with his hand on his chest, like a gentleman, to the 2 men. The whole gypsy camp was in raptures with him, and his brothers and sisters could not help taking some pleasure in showing off his accomplishments to an audience so interested and enthusiastic. But they longed for sunset. We're getting into the habit of longing for sunset. How I do wish we could wish something really sensible that would be of some use, so that we would be quite sorry when sunset came. The shadows got longer and longer, and at last there were no separate shadows any more, but one soft glowing shadow over everything, for the sun was out of sight, behind the hill. But he'd not really set yet. The people who make the laws about lighting bicycle lamps are the people who decide when the sun sets, and he has to do it to the minute, or they would know the reason why. But the gypsies were getting impatient. "Now, young uns, it's time you were laying of your heads on those pillows, so it is. That kid's all right. He's friendly with us now, so you just stand him over and sling that hook of yours, like you said." The women and children came crowding around the lamb. Arms were held out, fingers snapped invitingly, friendly faces beaming with admiring smiles. But all failed to tempt the loyal lamb. He clung with arms and legs to Jane, who happened to be holding him, and uttered the gloomiest roar of the whole day. "It's no good. Hand a little poppet over, miss, and we'll soon quiet him." And still the sun would not set. "Tell her about how to put him to bed, anything to gain time, and be ready to bolt when the sun really does make up its silly old mind to set." "Yes, I'll hand him over in just 1 minute. But do let me just tell you, he has a warm bath every night and a cold one in the morning, and he's got a crockery rabbit that goes in the warm bath with him, and little Samuel saying his prayers in white china on a red cushion for the cold bath. Oh, and if you let the soap get in his eyes, the lamb—" "Lamb-keys," said he. He had stopped roaring to listen. "As if I hadn't never bathed a babby. Come on, you give us hold of him. Come to Melia, my precious." "Walagsy," replied the lamb at once. "Yes," but Anthea went on, "about his meals. You really must let me tell you, he has an apple or a banana every morning, and bread and milk for breakfast, and an egg for his tea sometimes, and—" "I've brought up 10, besides the others. Now come, miss, you hand him over, because I cannot bear it any longer. I just want to give him an hug."
We ain't settled yet who's he's to be, Esther.
Well, it won't be you, Esther. You've got 7 of 'em in your tail already.
Now let's not be sure about that, said Esther's husband.
And ain't I nobody to have a say neither?
And me? I'm a single girl and I've got no one but him to look after. I ought to have him.
You hold your tongue. Oi, shut your mouth. Don't you show me none of your impertinence.
Everyone was getting very angry. The dark gypsy faces were frowning and anxious looking. Suddenly a change swept over them, as if some invisible sponge had wiped away those cross and anxious expressions and left only a blank. The children saw the sun really had set, but they were afraid to move, and the gypsies were feeling so muddled because of the invisible sponge that had washed all the feelings of the last few hours out of their hearts that they could not say a word. The children hardly dared to breathe. Suppose the gypsies, when they recovered speech, should be furious to think how silly they had been all day. It was an awkward moment. Suddenly Anthea, greatly daring, held out the lamb to the red handkerchief man.
Here he is.
The man drew back.
I shouldn't like to deprive you, miss. Yeah, that's right. I mean, anyone who likes can have my share of him.
Well, as you said, I have got enough of my own, really.
He is a nice little chap, though,
said someone called Amelia, who was now the only one who was still looking at all affectionately at the whimpering lamb.
If I didn't think I must have a touch of the sun. Of course I don't want him. Take him away.
Oh, well, said Anthea. Shall we take him away?
Well, suppose you do, and we'll say no more about it, eh?
With great haste all the gypsies began to be busy about their tents for the night, all but Amelia. She went with the children as far as the bend in the road.
Let me give him a kiss, miss. I don't know what made us all go so silly like, but, I mean, us gypsies don't steal babies, whatever they may tell you. We've had enough of our own, to be honest. But you see, I lost all mine.
She leaned towards the lamb, and he, looking in her eyes, unexpectedly put up a grubby soft paw and stroked her face.
Papa,
said the lamb, and he let the gypsy woman kiss him, and what is more, he kissed her brown cheek in return, a very nice kiss, as all his kisses are, not a wet one like some babies give. The gypsy woman moved her finger about on his forehead as if she had been writing something there, and the same with his chest and his hands and his feet.
May he be brave, and have the strong head to think with, and the strong heart to love with, and the strong hands to work with, and the strong feet to travel with, and always come safe home to his own.
Then she said something in a strange language no one could understand, and suddenly added,
Well, I must be saying so long. So glad to have made your acquaintance.
She turned and went back to her home, the tent by the grassy roadside. The children looked after her till she was out of sight. Then Robert said, How silly! Even sunset didn't put her right. What rot she talked. Well, said Cyril, if you ask me, I think it was rather decent of her.
Decent,
said Anthea.
It was very nice of her indeed. I think she's a dear. She's just too frightfully nice for anything,
said Jane. And they went home, very late for tea and unspeakably late for dinner. Martha scolded, of course, but the lamb was safe. I say, it turned out we wanted the lamb as much as anyone in the end, said Robert later.
Well, of course.
But do you feel different about it now the sun's set? Well, no, said all the others together.
Then it's lasted over sunset with us.
No, it hasn't, Cyril explained. The wish didn't do anything to us. We always wanted him with all our hearts. Only we were behaving like pigs this morning, especially you, Robert. Robert bore this with a strange calm. I certainly thought I didn't want him this morning. Perhaps I was a pig. But everything looked so different when we thought we were going to lose him.